in human resources, filing employee files at Lehman Brothers, which was a big investment bank. And as it turned out, the person who was running the European graduate program was ill, and they put me in the role. I mean, it was huge. Put me in the role. So suddenly I was just learning how to use a computer. We used to use fax. And then I was running a program whereby we recruited students from throughout Europe and a little bit in Asia, and obviously with a big focus in the UK. And we brought them on and we put them on a 3-year graduate program, and I was part of managing that. And then we would partner with the New York office. So I got to experience grad recruitment abroad versus here, and I'll give you some of my insights on that. Then I decided to move back to South Africa 10 years later, not 6 months. And if you guys go abroad, you'll come back with enough money to buy a car and a house and all of that. But you must come back because we've got to bring those skills back to our country. Came back here, continued always in human resources or recruitment, but I really found that I enjoyed the younger talent more. So when I was offered a job at Rand Merchant Bank as the head of recruitment, I decided to start up it wasn't common to have a grad program. So started up at RMB and I implemented a graduate program, which started with 3 grads and then a winter school. And now you can see a lot of organizations have bought into the whole internships and then grad programs, which brings me to where you guys are now. I'll speak very much I'll speak from 2 perspectives. I'll speak as a campus recruiter to tell you what I looked for in the 10 years I was at RMB. So just to let you know, I left RMB 2 years ago, and I now work as an independent consultant, doing work readiness, doing CVs, doing career coaching, which is quite daunting to be out of corporate. But so I'll tell you what the tips that I have from being in a corporate looking for students to join grad programs. And then I'll also tell you what to expect in terms of the process. So not only what the criteria are that stand out or what you should do, but also how to handle the process. And I was saying to Kristen again earlier, I'm doing one of these sort of every night at the moment to different audiences, and there's so many different topics, and I'm tending to I can spend up to 2 hours on just one element. So I'm going to be doing a little bit of skimming through of the different areas within the recruitment process and finding a job. But if there are things that we don't get to, we can absolutely regroup and do something further. So I want to see, I'm just going to go back now and see if I can see any faces. And
so Tracy, about that, we actually can't have cameras on because it does take too much bandwidth, but we can interact within the chat room.
Perfect. I like it. I guess it's more just to not miss anything. Okay, so I'm taking that off. All right, guys. So I believe that you're at you're in different years. So for the people who are perhaps in 2nd or 3rd year, I was saying to Kristen, I always say, I always think of honors as final year. I'm sorry, you guys have got to do honors. No, you got to find a way. I'll help you. So if it's maybe 3rd year honors, depending on it, UCT, I know that with the business science and so on, it is 4 years engineering. Then masters, I mean, PhDs, you guys are so clever. I think you will be daunting to an organization. They'll be scared to hire you. You'll know more than them. So it's going to be at different stages. So in the earlier stages, the things I'll talk about are going to be more relevant. So say, for example, how you get VAC work and work shadowing and so on in order to start getting into companies. And then there'll be people now who are looking for a job for 2020. There may even be some of you looking for a job right now. those looking for 2021, sorry. And then there will be, that's probably what it is. So it's those who are going to be looking now and taking steps for when they need, those who are looking like they really need a job now, and in fact, I can't forget those of you who are already in process and maybe struggling and so on. So I've broken up the recruitment process into the following areas. Okay, so some companies start to recruit at school level. It's not common, and if they do bursaries at school level, it tends to be more a sort of CSI, social sort of responsibility kind of funding, rather than as part of their recruitment process. Because the kids are still young and it's hard to make a commitment at that young age. Then some companies will come onto campus from first year. I mean, the companies that hire loads of grads, like the audit firms and so on, they will offer bursaries right from, first year or whatever. Some companies will offer bursary top-ups. Some bursaries are sort of merit-based. Other companies I know will do the degree up until postgrad, etc. So there are different ways, but when the bursary is, when you get a chance for a bursary, the two considerations that you're going to make are what I need to tell you. You see what I said? I can just talk about one thing, like bursaries and how to apply and how to manage them. And I'm only on the second topic. Then the other thing that's become more important in terms of grad recruitment is VAC work, job shadowing, internships, etc. In the past, there may have been, more of a nice to have, but I'm noticing they're a big part of the recruitment process. Then I'll talk about applying and how to sort of apply and what to attach, etc. I'm not going to talk too much about CVs. I'll have to come back for a whole new session, but I do believe that you guys have had somebody who's touched on sort of CV content, etc. Then I'll touch on the application process and handling things like these online or the video clips or blah, blah. Then the other area that's interesting to know, and I'm thinking this is already quite a lot, so I'll skim through it so that I can cover it all. The other thing is, not only if you're applying online or via a program, that's not the only way that you should engage. There's also additional sort of networking, coffee chats, etc. you can do. During the interview process, the different steps, so it can be the video clip, it can be psychometrics, it can be interview, different rounds, can be a final round, etc. In fact, there are other areas, but I'm not going to be able to touch on them today, but these are around final round interviews, how they work, how to sort of handle offers. If you've got more than one offer, how to sort of leverage it in your own, to negotiate it. If you are accepting, how to do that. If you get another offer and you decide to turn the original offer down, how to do that appropriately. If you get an offer and you decide to study more, how to negotiate getting a bursary for that extra study from a company, etc., etc. And then also, it's quite nice to talk a bit about from the time you accept your offer until your start date, and there's a few things that you can do there. So, Kristen, before I start, questions. Is there anything that you want to flag for now?
Yes, there has been 2 questions so far. The first one is, what skills or non-academic attributes are attractive to recruiters? And then the second one is a bit more specific, so maybe it can be answered later. It's from someone who is a final year candidate attorney, and they want to know a bit more about full-time employment for law students?
Okay, that is quite a difficult one to take to do online, but it is something we can potentially pick up offline, for example. I will try. All right, so in terms of the non-academic or extramural or other sort of skills, maybe some of them are irrelevant and how to or whether to put them onto the CV. I've made a note here to touch on that when we do the CV. In terms of sort of where law or their articles, whether they're actuaries or CAs or if it's in the legal field, finding work in that related field, including, you know, board and articles, etc. It's quite a nice topic on its own. However, let's see how we go.
Okay.
All right. So in terms of, I'm going to jump beyond school funding. And I'm actually going to just start by touching on bursaries. Why bursaries are good, apart from the funding, is that, well, hugely because of the funding, of course. Why they're good is it gives you a foot in the door to companies. And it can be that they've offered you a bursary and there's a lock-in clause that you will work for them, or there's a clause that you'll work for them if they have a job for you, or they'll say there's no tie back. But either way, you can ask them, or they will offer you opportunities to go and spend time in the business, to job shadow, to do internships, etc. You can grab all of that, even if there's a lock-in, because, and this is factual, this is not shady at all. If, for example, you got to the end of the road and you decided that you didn't want to work for that company and you've sort of changed your mind, whichever company you do go to will buy you out. And the company who's bursted you will be paid, they will be paid back fully. They anticipate this. And at the end of the day, they would rather that you didn't go and work for them for the sake of it. And trust me on this, it doesn't benefit any of you. You're not going to be happy. They don't want you to, but you're not going to be productive. And there may be other grads who will come in that they hadn't bursted. So it is fairly good. It's completely appropriate if you handle it appropriately. They won't be out of pocket, and in the meantime, you've had your funding paid. Whichever company is hiring you will buy you out of the bursary, and then you'll have a commitment to, if you leave them, you'll have a commitment to pay it back. In terms of, this is an interesting one because I know Kristen had mentioned about COVID and how things have changed. Remember I said initially people thought of graduate programs and internships and job shadowing as a liability. So it was almost sort of annoying. You know, they're trying to work and to have someone there and they're not able to add value. But they opened up more and more to it because business have seen that having you guys, students, in the building, engaged, you know, working on projects, etc., is a far better way for them to observe you and get to know you and for you to get to know them than 2 half-an-hour interviews. So for now, when I say for now, these days compared to initially, people are quite keen on internships. And what they'll do is they'll aim to hire perhaps half of their graduate class for the following year out of the intern or the winter school. And then they only have to go back to campus to find additional people who maybe they've missed or have gone to another organization for winter school but still want to apply, etc. It is a great chance to get a foot in the door, even if it means giving up a holiday. Or, well, hell yeah, I mean, give up the holiday. But there've even been people who've had to juggle like projects at varsity and in and out and whatever you get, and it's school fees. That's how you get your foot in the door. You guys have got to do it if you get a chance. You know, it is critical. Now, jobs, so that the internships can be different. So they can be a formal internship in the holidays, and I generally refer to winter internships sort of in the June, July vac, feeding into the following year Jan, Feb grad program. Sometimes for perhaps third years or penultimate, final years, they do internships in December, January, but the business is quite lean at that time. A lot of people on vacation, and they don't want to have a bunch of young people there to learn, and then they're floating around. And the content of the internships varies. So some organizations, some people will have a week, some places, others will have like a 3-week. Some will have overviews of the different areas, what the organization does, networking, etc. Others will allocate you to a particular desk or area or whatever and do actual work. There are also some who like to be project driven, so they'll give you a case study or something over a while and then you'll present it. Those are ideal. If you're just sort of sitting job shadowing and whatever, that'll tend to just be a day or two where you've asked someone a special favor or whatever, that you can just come and watch what they do. And if, say, for example, when I was at R&B, the holidays were 3 weeks, then we ran the R&B program for about 10 days, and we timed it with Standard Bank so that they ran theirs at a slightly different time so people could go to both. Okay. At the end of the internship, they will generally be able to tell you whether or not you are invited to final rounds. They don't ask you to then go apply from scratch. So this is really what I mean when I say a foot in the door. Anyone got questions? I need to take a sip of my tea. My throat is dry. Come on, show me a question.
I do have one question here. Someone asked, do you have any advice on internships during the lockdown period?
Beautiful. That's what I was going to say next. Who's that clever person? You can tell me afterwards.
Yeah.
All right. So what are they called? Brights. Somebody message, please. There's something called Bright Minds or Brights. Something. They're running great internships at the moment. In any case, I want to see if anyone knows. Bright something. All right. So this year, internships have gone south. What normally happens is they open the recruitment for internships around about February, and they recruit up until May, end of May, with a view to starting the internships in kind of, I don't know, the last week of June-ish. So a lot of the organizations have actually started recruiting for interns, and they even got as far as shortlisting and so on. And then what happened has happened, leaving them completely. And that's why this last question was a really good one. It's leaving them at a loss because they know the importance, and yet most, I heard today of somebody whose whole desk was packed up in Cape Town, including the chairs and all the screens and the earphones and the stationery and everything, and shipped to Limpopo so that the guy could keep working, so that he didn't come in the office. So they don't have people in the office. Now, what I would have liked to see more of virtual internships. And I just don't know why companies, in fact, it'd be great if somebody messages if they have had a South African authentic internship. We're talking about a week or so on, but virtually, not just the sort of one day, online internships, in one of the countries abroad. I can imagine it's probably, well, I mean, there's no excuse really. I would say that it's so new and it was so last minute, suddenly taking things virtually may have, but no, I don't buy it. I think it's ridiculous. In any case, I think what does drive it is, okay, we don't want to have all these interns and then the expectation is there, we're going to take on grads next year because we don't even know what we're doing next year, etc. It could be that, I'm guessing. But there are so many different ways that we could run, they could run amazing virtual internships with very little stress. And so if you guys are affiliated with any companies, it's something that I'm more than willing to give them a few words of advice, etc. It also may be too late. So in terms of how to handle the virtual internship thing, let me think about it. Even, how about this? Even if they're saying on their website or whatever that they're not doing internships, why don't you guys, think who you would approach? I'll tell you who to approach a little bit later. Why don't you guys reach out to companies that you want to work for and try your luck and say, I really wanted to do your winter internship and obviously it hasn't happened. Is there a chance I could maybe do a virtual coffee chat with your team, or could I listen in to one of your, I mean, obviously within reason, you're not going to say, can I listen into one of your client calls, or could you set me up to chat to or listen into maybe 3 different graduates in different areas for a few hours, or could I speak to a grad and they maybe give me a little bit of a project to help them, etc. Now, guys, listen. You can't, and especially if you're going to mention my name, that you start saying Tracy Ashington says, then they're going to want to stab me. But so you have to do this within reason. And you have to say, okay, I really want to work for this company. I applied for the internship. You're not just going to start, so be really structured. Okay, I really want to work for RMB. They are more likely to welcome your approach than them sitting and try to put something together at this time and trying to, work out if it's gonna work. So say, I want to be, and forgive me, I know their disciplines across. I'm just talking about investment banking because that's, an easy point of reference for me. But if I was a student and I thought I'd really like to work in credit, and I didn't just do a random approach, I Googled, see who the people are, the senior people in credit, say, okay, I'm not going to rash them. I'm going to send an email to the senior manager and say, I'm a student in business science finance looking for a grad program next year. I understand you're not able to offer an internship now, but I'm asking your advice insofar as a young person trying to make a decision, trying to get a foot in the door. What do you think I should do? Is there someone I could speak to? Is there something I could read? You see how powerful that is. Suddenly you are 1 out of 4,000 people who are applying because you've actually done a really specific, professional, targeted approach. Okay, questions?
Hi, we actually have quite a few questions so far. So Kristen? The first...
And sorry, I cut off someone. You can tell them all, tell me all of them. I'll make a few notes and those I can incorporate, I will, and we'll just keep a note of the others.
Okay.
Hi, sorry. Hi, Tracy and Kristen. I was going to ask you, Kristen, if I'll mark the questions that Tracy needs to answer. you can then just read them out for her. If you can do 2 at a time, like read the question, let Tracy answer, and then I'll mark them as done as soon as it's completed.
All right. Thank you so much, Tasha.
Okay.
Okay. Do you want to do, if there are there 1 or 2 that are kind of theme?
Yes. So there are a few about virtual internships and things like that. The first one is, how will academic records this year be viewed by employers and universities in the context of coronavirus? And I think the reason this question has been asked is specifically because for UCT non-finalist students, so everyone who's not in their final year, this semester are just getting a pass or a fail on their transcripts. They're not necessarily getting a percentage. So I think that's just causing a bit of concern.
Okay. So, all right, so virtual internships, I'll quickly go back to touch on, although I have talked about it a bit. The way in which and the importance of transcripts, and then I must go back to, in terms of the CVs, because we talked about non-relevant sort of experience and whether we should add it. So just to finish on the virtual internships, sometimes when often they've never done it before, it's quite nice to do a bit of a Google about what, did anyone, by the way, Kristen, did anyone bring up that Bright something? It's in the back of my mind. It's this great site for internships, online internships in the UK. Like really free, really, I was quite impressed. They involved companies, top tier companies over there, and they run a, day-long free internship, which is nice on your CV as well. Anyway, I'll find it. So in terms of the virtual internships, it's quite nice. Right. Juanita, well done, clever. Okay, well, clever, I mean, well done, cleverer than me. Thank you. So in terms of the virtual internships, what you could do is, remember, you're kind of suggesting something that you're making up that they're not going to know. Google something that's happening in the UK and what a company is maybe doing, and say, well, that may antagonize them if you say, oh, so-and-so is doing this, but just say, I've noticed a company in the UK is doing, would you guys ever be able to do this or whatever? These organizations are super focused on getting top talent and developing young talent. Trust me, I'm not just saying that. I don't work for them anymore. I'm telling you the truth. But it's also nice for you to show a little initiative and to sort of point at what you want. The worst they can say is no, but they can say, okay, chat to me when final rounds are happening. And it really can be, well, I'm not even going to tell you. You go find out what do you think would be useful in terms of virtual exposure to a firm. It doesn't mean to be an internship. Think about, how would you like virtual exposure to a company you're thinking of working for? Reach out to them and say what you'd like and see if they can. Okay, so in terms of, we'll talk about transcripts, and then we'll also talk about adding information in terms of, let's see, transcript, in terms of your CV that may not be seen as relevant. All right, so the CV pack, you see I'm already running out of time. CV pack, I know you've talked a little bit about the structure of your CVs before with one of the speakers. So I'm going to whiz through that, specifically in terms of South African CVs, talk to Faith, talk to, you see, that's why I mustn't look at the chats. So in the US, they tend to have that like 1-page resume. It's kind of, well, it's kind of hardcore. It's like investing. Okay? Then in perhaps Europe or so, they will have maybe 2 pages. And then in South Africa, I've got up to like 16 pages. Guys, if you picture yourself, so you say, what should I include in a CV? what should my CV look like? Stop and think for a moment if you were recruiting for your company and you were screening, let's say 50 applications. What do you think would be important on a CV? What would be useful for you to know about an applicant in order to, select them for an interview? So that's always a nice way of, sort of gauging what to put into the CV. Now, when I say South African CVs can be really long, I think that companies in SA often ask for things that are, in the US, they're like, oh, you can't, why should I say what gender I am? And, that kind of thing. Whereas South Africa is pretty shameless. They'll say, do you have a driver's license? Do you have a criminal record? I'm telling you, no, none of that. None of that big writing, no criminal record, health, good. I love that. Who's going to say health fair? But anyway, family members, flipping, none of that, please. Keep it to, I could actually share my screen, but I won't right now. I might do. So keep it to the basics, guys. Brief. Imagining that recruiter is looking at your CV amongst a few, so powerful that you keep it minimalist and stick to the facts so that they don't get all caught up in all this other sort of waffle. Because when in an interview, you're going to be able to elaborate anyhow. When you guys are, as you are younger, your education holds a lot of weight, and you should put that first. As you start to get work experience, then the education becomes less relevant, less of a deciding factor, etc., etc. And you can then drop that further down and talk about your work experience, employment history. Always date it, current to, so go from now until, go backwards, most recent first. And in terms of adding what you should add, so again, when I was first starting to work, I could easily say I did waitress at Pizza Hut, I did do some au pairing, etc. I did work for of course, that's good stuff to know. I did do certain things to raise money for my studies or whatever. That's important when you're young. As you would get older, so that wouldn't be relevant for me now, but definitely add that kind of thing. Even if it's not relevant experience, it shows that you've sort of gone out there on your VAC and you've sort of got some sort of business experience, or you can justify it in terms of, I wanted to help my folks with my fees, etc. So yeah, definitely add it, definitely. And then when you, let's just see here if I can. I'm always nervous about sharing stuff on my screen. You know that I have to tell you, one of my giggles was, after 22 years, I've seen a lot, and one of my giggles was when somebody, you see, and I remembered him. So, somebody said at the end when they said hobbies, and he said meeting girls. And I'm still giggling. And then the other, you see, he did something, I've remembered him in the last 10 years. Then one of the other person said family members and talked about wife and blah, blah, and the dogs with their names. And I'm not belittling them. I think it's really innocent and I think it's divine. You don't need to put whether you've got a driver's license and stuff unless it's a driving job. So what I wanted to quickly finish off on CVs is to tell you that, let's see here, Give me one sec. I mean, I'm using mine. I love that. It's a bit of a cheat, but anyway, share screen. Were you saying something, Kristen?
No, but we do. Okay.
Okay. Oh, we're running out of time. Okay. Do you see it, guys? One page. Punchy, all that you need. All right. So let me stop share. All right. Kristen, anything from your side?
Yes, we do have quite a few questions, but I just want to ask all of the attendees, if you do have any questions, please do send them through the Q&A button, and please do not use the chat room. But I think the questions that I would like to ask regarding what you've done so far, someone has said, do you think that having a profile on LinkedIn, Careers 24, etc., would increase the chances of being chosen for an internship or a job? And then another question is, I'm also curious about the prospects for graduates overseas. Are employers even considering hiring people from overseas?
Okay. Anything else?
There's one here. This person said, I recently graduated with an honors degree in the science field, and a lot of organizations are offering entry-level positions, but still does not hire because we do not have enough experience. What can we do to overcome this, because we can only get experience once we are hired?
Exactly. You take whatever you can get. If you have to work for free for 3 months to prove yourself, put your foot in the door, you do that. Again, it's school fees. But I'll tell you the importance. When I kind of say that flippantly, but I'll tell you, and I jump to the last one. So in terms of LinkedIn, Careers 24, etc., those kind of things, of course, it's good to have. I'm finding that, and we can do a whole nother session on LinkedIn, because I'm finding that LinkedIn has got nuances insofar as graduate recruiters don't really go to recruitment agencies, Careers 24, Career Junction, PNet, or LinkedIn to hire graduates. They tend to go to campus or use their campus brochures, do presentations, career fairs, and so on. I find that LinkedIn and so on are used more for sort of professional networking. It's not to say you shouldn't have one, but I find the response rate on LinkedIn really bad. You know, you can send like 20 LinkedIn inbox messages or whatever, no one comes back to you. It's not personalized enough. Should you have one? Yes, no downside. Is it a, yeah, I wouldn't say it's like a really important. If there are grad programs or whatever, the specs, and I'm talking grad programs a lot, let me just specify grad programs and entry level positions. So these are positions where they don't want you to have experience, okay? They are hiring you from university with no relevant experience because they want to train you up. So that's what I'm referring to. If you are applying to grad or entry level roles, I think the greatest hit rate is to do two things. First of all, to go via their website, via whether it's Leaply or one of those sort of platforms. But I'm still such a great fan of finding out who is head of grad recruitment for them and following up with an email, attaching your CV and so on in an appropriate way. So what I mean is, let me reiterate, there is a lot of value. Remember, you need to stand out. There's a lot of value in saying, hi, Tracy, I see you head up grad recruitment. I have applied via the system. I just want to make sure that you notice my CV. And you follow up. It doesn't have to be an email, but just find a way to differentiate yourself. Or hi Patrick, I see you're a grad at this company. I've applied for the grad program. Would you ever do a quick Zoom virtual coffee chat with me to tell me how you got into the program? So it's those little like add-ons that are more important than LinkedIn and having all these sort of other profiles. Then in terms of overseas, so it depends. If you have, it's much like in South Africa. Let me just kind of elaborate. So in South Africa, if a company has to hire a candidate who doesn't have a work permit, it's harder because they then have to motivate to the Department of Labor that they want to hire the person because they have scarce skills, which is hard at grad level. And the same goes for abroad. So they would hire locals because it's easier. They don't have to go through the permission of a work permit thing. I find it easier to find work abroad if you have a couple of years experience here, unless you're willing, as I did, to go and like start off. I think my first job was looking after children and they made me iron and I was doing all sorts of, if you're willing to kind of go across and work your way up, then fair enough. But I do think there's a preference for hiring a local, especially in subdued markets like there are. If you have a passport for that country, absolutely give it a try. Just be targeted though. Don't be applying there, applying here, applying there, then you're going to be all over the place. It's going to be stressful for you. Decide to go there, find somewhere over there, an agency or whatever, and make it, or even if you can afford it. I mean, who can afford it really? You're going to have to apply from here. It's very luxurious to go over there and start applying. All right, so that is in terms of working abroad. Let's see. Do you know what I'm going to do in the few minutes we have left? I'm going to, so I've kind of touched on how to follow up. So you're going to apply via whatever forum they stipulate. But if you can, without rushing, please, I use rushing because we had one or two over the years. I had one guy from UKZN who used to follow up constantly, and we started calling him started calling him Rash, but he got a job, right? He's a transactor now. So when you apply, they'll come back to you with an automated response. Then sometimes they ask you to do a few questions online and that kind of screens you. Sometimes they ask you to send a short video clip. Sometimes they send a few questions to you. Other times they will, just trying to think, yeah, it tends not to be obviously via the website or whatever. It tends not to be any other way. And even more so now, I think that they're doing it via their company websites that may link to a Leaply, for example. And then, so that they'll do an initial screening. So FNB, they get like, I don't know, 12,000 applicants. I'm not scaring you by no means, because remember, they take on hundreds of grads, so it's different. I mean, it's an example only. A regular, organization could get a couple of hundred, and maybe they've got, I don't know, 10 places, etc. So when you apply to FNB, they can't sit and look at all 12,000. So they will put certain criteria, which is quite brutal, because, I mean, if you've had a situation where, think about this year, this year I think there's going to be some sort of leniency, I hope so. But say, for example, you had a personal thing happen, and you missed the cutoff that the system says you've got to have, you missed it by 2%, whatever, 10, whatever. And then you booted. So the rest of your life is kind of affected by that because you're not even given an interview. That's where a follow-up directly really helps, because People are going to understand if you said, Tracy, I was declined via Leaply. I use Leaply because I work with them a lot. It's not to say Leaply declines, but it's an algorithm, right? So, Tracy, you know, I had this sort of situation. I know I have been declined via Leaply, but I'd really appreciate you looking at my CV. Something like that. So the algorithm will shortlist because, you know, let's face it, the companies only have so much capacity, but it's not foolproof. I'm a bit wobbly about that. At RMB, I wasn't popular because I used to say, send an application via email and attach your documents, which is so archaic. I mean, I cringe. And then I would sit and go through each CV, but whatever. So then if they shortlist you, they will sometimes follow up and say, okay, cool, you've been shortlisted. We'd like you to send a 2-minute clip, you know, video clip or whatever, via WhatsApp. And in that clip, you tell us about yourself and you answer these questions. So off you'd go. After that, then they may ask you to do an online chat. Then they may ask you to do like a psychometric, which is a whole nother kind of conversation, but I'm just telling you the different ways in which they select. Then they could ask you to do a panel interview. So there's all sorts of things that could set your project or whatever. And that's even now. So it's even now with the COVID lockdown, they're doing it on online. So it would be like, you know, line managers. Then I'll just add 1 or 2 more in case there are questions. Then what is really good to know is that they will follow through after each round. They'll come back to you and say unsuccessful or successful. It is okay to follow up with them directly with the recruiter and say, I just want to check in. I fully understand that you're working through applications. I just want to drop you a line. When are we going to hear? Is there an update? Something like that, something polite and so on. Other times you will get an automated response. But by the time the formal sort of interview process starts, so perhaps it's going to be 2 rounds, they will have got all of that stuff out of the way. Questions?
We do have still quite a few questions here. I don't think we'll be able to get through all of them, but I can put them in an email to you after the webinar. But there is one related to what you spoke about earlier. It says that it asks, what advice can you give to a non-South African citizen who would like to do a graduate program in South Africa?
Okay. It happens. It's not easy. It's not easy. Not only does South Africa need to get the situation sorted, because we are seriously lagging. So obviously there's got to be a focus on local South Africans, previously disadvantaged or whatever the word is. But as I said before, not because of the pressure to meet the Department of Labor sort of requirements, it means that somebody who's non-South African has to work even harder. They kind of have to prove why they should get that place. That said, there's not a year that I have been a recruiter that we haven't taken non-South African or 2 or 3. Because if a manager or a team or whatever feel that you are the right person, they will do their very best. And this goes across the board. Hey, this is not even, it's not even non-South Africans, or it's not even like you're an undergrad or postgrad. People will accept exceptions, but you got to work harder for it. Okay. So instead of I had one young lady say, Tracy, I don't mind coming and sitting next to your desk and running for Vida coffee every time you need it. Now, I'm not saying you guys, if you're an undergrad and you know they're looking for postgrad, you don't have to say, I'm going to go and run for Vida, give me a chance. But what you guys have to do is think of ways in which, if you don't meet their very sort of narrow criteria, think of ways in which to show them that you're still damn good. I'll tell you a story, and this is an example of where, so it kind of relates to the non-South African thing or the outliers in terms of the criteria. So the criteria are like this, people are here. I met a young guy when I was doing a talk at the BMF. Years he was second year. I said, I want to hire you. He's like, I'm only a second year. Then a few years later, I bumped into him campus. And then when I was screening, I mean, I didn't remember. There were a lot of people. I screened them out. I declined them based on his marks. We have pressure as well. And when you're grad, your marks obviously play a part. So he was kind of in the 50s. And he wrote me, oh, so when he knew I was on campus for a career fair, he came. He showed up there, right there in my face. And he was not taking no. And then he said, Tracy, and you know, he engaged with me and he said, you've declined me. And I said, for that hunger and passion, that's not just about you being in the zone. For that kind of hunger and passion, I'm going to put your CV forward for consideration. The managers said, sorry, we can't. We're only hiring, I don't know, 10 this year. We cannot look, you know, beyond. So I went back to him. So what did he do without me? He went home and he wrote a page. It didn't have to be a page, but he wrote a page where he was quoting stuff and he was referring to stuff and he was showing times that he really had, he was basically convincing me and the managers that it wasn't just that he was not a South African or his marks weren't good or he was an undergrad or, you know, and then we're looking at postgrads. And I'm telling you, he landed up, he now works in London. He landed up to be the top graduate of that year. He is now a senior transactor for another company. If you don't fit their tight criteria, you've got to get them to notice you. Okay, so don't give up if you're non-South African. The thing is, some of the systems do say put in your ID, so you may actually have to be creative and kind of contact. Go and find someone in the organization who you can see on LinkedIn isn't South African and say to them, how did you make it work? Perfect. All right. Oh, I'm talking too much. I think we're over time.
Yeah, it is just been an hour. So I think unfortunately we have to end it there. But I have taken a note of the rest of the questions that we weren't able to answer, and I will forward them to you and then send them off to all of our members as well.
Cool. And I'll just tell you, if I look at my notes here, okay, so a really good, there's two things that are pretty good, is creating a career strategy, and maybe I can even do that with you, Kristen, at some stage, and you can talk to the team. Creating a strategy insofar as these are companies I want to start by applying to. How do I apply? How do I follow up? How do I make it happen? Rather than sort of click, 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 and then you never hear back. And then the other thing that's really useful, I'm actually doing it for I don't know if any of you guys are part of Study Trust. You must be bored of me now. I'm doing so many chats to you, the Study Trust kids, but I'm doing, it's really nice to talk about the do's and don'ts of an interview. So that's something whether or not I do it for you guys, but otherwise, Kristen, that's something that would be good. All right. Any other questions? I'm not in a rush, but I'm sure that you guys need to wrap it up.
Okay, I think if we do one more question, there's quite an interesting one here. It says, bearing in mind the very inevitable implications of the fourth industrial revolution on jobs and employment in the future, how can you advise us as students in terms of upgrading ourselves and the skills we have to possess in order to remain relevant when we enter the job market?
Okay. I actually did a talk. I don't know if any of you are part of the Orbis Foundation. Then you and during Jamboree. I mean, not everyone would have seen all of the talks, but I did a bit of a talk on this because I think the term is so annoying. And why I think it's annoying is it's daunting. You guys are already stressed about finding jobs, and you've got so much, so much other stuff going on. And now you're hearing that a machine is, going to take over and whatever. It traumatizes people. I was speaking to Kanshu. Kanshu was the finance lecturer at UCT. He's one of my best friends. And I said, in talking about the fourth industrial revolution, instead of inspiring you guys to go and get scarce skills and whatever, it's causing a lot of anxiety. And this is my answer to it. Do you remember when I said, well, you will remember when I said earlier about Leaply? Now, Leaply is an algorithm machine screening. Does Leaply know, can Leaply ever know that you were really sick in second year and you lost somebody dear to you? You were part of COVID and your marks stank, or whatever, that Leaply cannot pick up. A machine can only do so much. Trust me, in your generation, machines are not going to take away your jobs. And if you can show that you can do something better than a machine, or you can fill in gaps, I mean, you don't even really need to. I'm telling you right now, it's not going to impact you. What I do say is follow the obvious things like learning to code, or in fact, it's not even to keep up. Think of some like innovative stuff. Think about, don't be like a video store that didn't think ahead about, programs where they could, and they declared themselves null and void. Think about what you want to do as a career, and think about the gaps that could come up, with advancements that could come up in that space, and upskill in it. So you could be somebody in marketing, and you realize that regular kind of marketing, I tell you what, this is a good example. Somebody in, I'm selling a property, and I was horrified. So the guy said, don't worry about organizing your tenants for viewings and stuff. I'll go and take a video or whatever. I'll do a virtual kind of tour. They'll look online. And I thought, that kind of thing, if you're thinking ahead about where the gaps could be, you're not only keeping your job and doing well at it, you're cutting edge. So think about it. So say, fourth industrial revolution, where I am now, where could this go, and what am I going to do to upskill to get there? And then you'll nail it.
All right. Thank you so much for answering that question. I think we will have to stop it there because we are over time. But I would just like to thank everyone who came to today's talk for coming. I hope that you all found it very helpful and that it did give you some confidence to go out and start your job search or start looking for internships. And I'd also like to thank the Golden Key head office for allowing us to host on their platform. It has made everything a lot easier. And last but not least, I would like to thank Tracy for taking the time to come and speak to us today. Your expertise in the graduate recruitment space is literally invaluable to all of us. And yeah, just thank you so much for speaking to us and really helping us and giving us some guidance and putting a lot of our fears to rest today. We really appreciate it.
And I'll just finish off by saying I follow me, get a LinkedIn profile actually, for the reason that you can follow people that are giving sort of advice, career advice and so on. So you guys are welcome to add me, because I do give some fairly regular, well, I give regular advice. But then just in finishing, I have to say, as I said to you earlier, I'm doing a lot of these kind of talks at the moment, and I have very rarely worked with someone as professional and organized as you, Kristen. You have been an absolute pleasure. She is chasing me up. I mean, you've done a great job, so thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, guys.
Thank you everyone for coming.
Bye.